Aristotle is believed to have said that to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, well, let's see how wise I've become. So here it is. This is the behavior and identity systems map that I have created over many years of trying to understand why I had such inner conflict and how to resolve it. Some of the terms that I'm going to be using in here may not be used in their fully correct way. Just understand that this is how I saw it, how I understand my own behavior and the systems that are going on with me. Let's zoom in and I'll walk you through this. The first part of the process is a concept that I call your world lens. This is created from three components and it affects how you actually see the world and your life. The first component is your focus. Where is your focus? Are you ruminating about an argument you had 3 weeks ago and the funny response you should have given? Or are you not really thinking about anything and your mind's just drifting? Next is your emotional state. Many things have an effect on your emotional state, and your emotional state also has an effect on how you see the world. And next up is physiology, which is a kind of group label that I put on a lot of different things like your hormones, your chemistry, your nutrition, hydration, all of those sort of things. And together they create the world lens that you view life through. So based on that lens and your conscious and unconscious identity, you then start to make emotional attachments to things. And some of those emotional attachments may end up becoming triggers. Once you've been triggered, you have to decide how you're going to behave. If you manage the situation with your conscious identity, then you will build that identity, and you will also build a strong self-image. However, if you react with emotion, then you will be building your unconscious identity and eroding your self-image, which I broke into 3 areas. The first one is that you can trust that your behavior is not going to cause you shame. The next one is that you can respect yourself through your standards. And the final one is that you'll have the confidence to do what needs to be done, even if you don't want to. Every time you behave in alignment with your conscious identity, you're building alignment and you're building your self-image. You're increasing your pride and you're reducing any shame that you may have. Every time you react with emotion, you're creating dissonance between your self-image and your identity. And over time, you start building shame and eroding your pride. So after understanding this, I was able to trace back how I got to a point of hating myself so much. Let me walk you through it. Most of the time, my world lens was pretty crappy. I was tired all the time. I was usually stressed out. I was in a bad mood. So the way that I viewed life wasn't exactly positive. Next up, I wasn't really that conscious about my identity. There was a lot of unconscious stuff going on. So emotional attachments were happening almost out of my control. So it began by understanding that my world lens was pretty bad. I was tired all the time. I often wasn't focused on the right things. And most of the time, my emotions were all over the place. So the way that I viewed life was pretty negative. I was very emotional because I didn't really have that much of a stated identity. And so things were happening on automatic pilot almost. Something would happen and trigger me. I would react with emotion without really thinking about it. That would cause me to feel shame and it would get rid of any pride that I had. And then I would have a chance to either de-escalate that moment, recover and calm down and go back to a conscious identity, or react to my reaction, double down and start this whole thing again. And that's what happened. Both moment to moment and year to year, I would go through this over and over again. In some days, I could do this several times. And all of this is reducing your self-image and it's increasing your unconscious identity. Now, after years and years and years of this, what ended up happening was I had built quite a large unconscious identity that I wasn't really aware of. My self-image was in the toilet because I didn't trust myself, I didn't really have much self-respect, and I had no confidence either. And the things that I did have in my conscious identity were so far away from the way that I was behaving that this dissonance just grew and grew and grew. If we take a quick look at some of these things, we can see that some of the beliefs that I had were that I was lazy, weak, and stupid, that I hated myself, that I didn't really believe that I could change because I didn't have any faith in myself. And then on the purpose side of things, unwittingly, what happened was I was making sure that my purpose was focused on control and minimization, controlling as many areas of my life as I possibly could because I couldn't count on what my behavior was going to be. So I wanted to make the world small so that I could have less different situations that I would have to manage that behavior in. And both of those things made my life smaller and smaller and smaller. So as you can see, this unconscious identity is quite damaging, and over time, it can really impact your life. And at some point, this dissonance got to a point where it was just too loud for me to ignore. And so I started observing the patterns of my behavior. After observing these patterns for a while, I ended up having to acknowledge my part in this and the impact that it had had on my life and those around me. The next step in my journey was to accept the things that I'd done, said, thought that brought me shame, and look at them with humility, honesty, and grace instead of freaking out and using it as another reason to go into that unconscious state. After making peace with the reality of my past, the next thing was to resolve to make a commitment. And it took me a while to understand what that commitment looked like, but eventually I realized that it was creating a conscious identity that I was proud of and that I could live by. And so more recently, I've been practicing how to live by this identity. And I'm also learning at the same time how to deal with emotions in this new identity. And the next phase is to get to a point of stability where your new autopilot is based around this conscious identity. And then the final stage is to evolve. This isn't a static thing. Identity isn't a one and done. Your identity grows and evolves as you do and as life happens to you. But it's been a long and hard road. And for every step forwards, seemingly there was a step backwards. So as we go through this, just understand that this was happening an awful lot of the time. I'd take a step forwards and then a step or 3 or 5 backwards. The first is one of the worst. When you acknowledge your part in all of the problems in your life and that you've caused for other people, it can feel like confirmation of your worst possible fears about yourself. And rather than continue to sit with this, it's much easier to just revert to the old unconscious identity. And I did that many times before I actually managed to get through to the point where I could push through. So after acknowledging that you have played a part in this, the next step is to accept all of the things that you've done. Now, this generates a lot of shame and again can cause a rush back to the old unconscious identity rather than sitting with it and being able to have humility for yourself and grace and understand that, yes, that was you in the past and you did those things and they might have been terrible, but going forward, you don't have to be that person. Your new identity is going to stop you from acting in those ways. The next stage is where you resolve and commit to make a change. The trap is if you don't actually start doing something immediately, then you can end up thinking that you've already done the work. So after making the commitment, you actually start creating your new identity. This is great, and to begin with, you have lots of energy and motivation, but over time, it's easy to lose interest and momentum. Perhaps things start evening out and you think the work's done. So then once you've actually created an identity, you actually have to start living it. Now, I call this practicing because a lot of the time you'll find that you'll make mistakes or there'll be setbacks or you won't really know what's going on and you won't be sure if you're going in the right direction. And all of these things I label as being perfectionism and impatience. Because things aren't perfect and you're not seeing results immediately, it obviously isn't working, so why bother? Let's go back to that unconscious thing because we understand how that works. So after practicing this new identity for a while, understanding that setbacks don't mean failure, the next thing is to learn how to bring emotions and feelings back into this. Because up until now, it's been very much restricting those emotions and those feelings and working just by your identity. But you don't want to be a robot. So this is the next stage that I'm actually in at the moment, is learning how to bring emotions back in without going back to that old identity. And I'm kind of doing the next stage of stabilization at the same time, where what I'm trying to do is get my automatic pilot set to this new identity so that it doesn't take up quite so much effort to actually live by it. And the final step is to just keep evolving that identity as you go through your life. So there you have it, a mapping of moment to moment and over the longer period, all in one. Now, this has been really, really helpful to me, and it's actually allowed me to get to a point where I no longer hate myself. I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect in any way, and that's not really the goal. The goal was always to get to a point of inner peace and being able to unlock all of my potential. And in the next episode, I'll show you how I'm taking this and turning it into an app to help myself and others with behavior and identity management. That's it for this week. See you in the next one.